They laughed at her first. That cruel, echoing laughter that makes your chest burn and your eyes sting. Emily Parker stood in front of her 8th grade class, clutching her presentation note cards like a lifeline. Her voice had been steady when she said it. My mom is a Navy SEAL. But as soon as the words left her lips, the room erupted with disbelief. Girls can't be SEALs. You're such a liar. Yeah, right. Next you'll say she wrestled a shark. Every mocking word felt like a dagger. Emily's face flushed hot, her throat tightening as she tried to defend herself. It's true, she shouted, her voice trembling. She just doesn't talk about it because it's classified. But the more she insisted, the louder the jeers became. Even her teacher, Mrs. Robinson, gave her a skeptical look. Emily, it's important to be honest in your work, she said, her tone carrying the weight of dismissal. Emily sat down, fighting tears. She had always known her mom, Commander Sarah Parker, was different, quiet, disciplined, carrying an aura of strength that most parents didn't. But her mom never flaunted it. She never wore the uniform at home, never spoke about missions, never bragged. And now, Emily felt punished for telling the truth. For weeks, the whispers followed her in the hallways. SEAL girl, liar, attention seeker. At lunch, kids moved away from her table. Even her best friend, Mia, avoided eye contact, afraid of being dragged into the ridicule. Emily began to regret saying anything at all. She would walk home alone, head down, until she reached her house, a modest 2-story home with a flag swaying in the front yard. Inside, her mother's warm smile would greet her, but Emily couldn't bring herself to tell her about the bullying. How could she? Her mom was brave, unshakable. What would she think of a daughter too weak to handle a few mean kids? But everything changed one ordinary Tuesday morning. It was during history class, the lesson dragging on about Cold War politics, when the loud crash of boots thundered down the hallway. Shouts echoed through the corridors, sharp and commanding. The classroom door burst open with a force that made the walls rattle. In stormed a team of Navy SEALs, clad in tactical gear, rifles slung across their chests. Their presence filled the room like a tidal wave of authority. Helmets, night vision attachments, the SEAL Trident insignia gleaming on their uniforms, it was real. Not a movie, not a story. Every single student froze. And then, as the dust settled, a figure stepped forward, pulling off her helmet. Her hair spilled free, damp with sweat from training, and her piercing blue eyes swept the classroom. It was Sarah Parker, Emily's mom. The silence was deafening. The kids who had laughed now sat pale-faced, their mouths half open, as if words had abandoned them. Mrs. Robinson gripped her desk, stunned. Emily, Sarah said, her voice calm but commanding. You left your lunch at home again. Thought I'd bring it by. A ripple of stunned laughter broke out. Not cruel this time, but nervous, disbelieving. Emily sat frozen in her chair, her cheeks burning. She wanted to melt into the floor, but at the same time, her chest swelled with something she hadn't felt in weeks, pride. Sarah turned her gaze on the class. I hear there's been some talk about honesty. She didn't raise her voice, but it carried through the room like a drill sergeant's command. For the record, yes, women can be SEALs. And yes, I am one. If anyone doubts my daughter again, they can come to me. The unit behind her stood like statues, their presence alone enough to silence the most skeptical. One boy who had mocked Emily the loudest muttered under his breath, holy crap. When the SEALs left as quickly as they came, the room was forever changed. No one dared look at Emily the same way again. At lunch, kids whispered apologies. Mia sat with her again, awkwardly but earnestly trying to make amends. Even Mrs. Robinson gave her a nod of respect. But Emily wasn't looking for their approval anymore. That moment had given her something far more powerful. That night, Emily finally told her mom everything, the teasing, the loneliness, the shame. Sarah listened quietly, her strong hand resting over Emily's trembling one. When Emily finished, Sarah looked at her with the same unshakable calm she had in the classroom. You know what makes a SEAL, Emily? She asked softly. It's not the gear, or the training, or the missions. It's the ability to keep going when everyone else doubts you. To believe in yourself when no one else does. Today, you proved you have that in you. Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but this time they weren't from hurt. They were from pride. The next day at school, Emily walked in with her head held high. The whispers were still there, but different now, curious, even respectful. But she didn't need their validation. She knew the truth. She had lived it, and deep down, she carried her mother's words with her like armor. Strength isn't about what others see. It's about what you carry inside. By the end of that year, when her teacher asked the class to write about their heroes, Emily didn't hesitate. She wrote about her mom, not just as a Navy SEAL, but as the woman who taught her what courage really meant. And this time, no one laughed.
The cold wind bit against her cheeks as Alina hurried down the street, clutching her daughter's tiny hand. The world had not been kind to her. Left alone after her husband abandoned them, she worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. That evening, she was exhausted, her stomach empty, and her pockets carrying only a few crumpled bills meant for tomorrow's groceries. Yet as they passed a park bench, she saw him, an elderly man sitting hunched over, his face pale, his eyes distant, and his body trembling with hunger. Something inside her told her to stop, though she barely had anything left for herself. Her daughter tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Mama, he looks hungry." Alina swallowed hard, feeling the sting of tears. She had taught her little girl about kindness, but tonight was proof of whether those words meant anything. She reached into her worn-out bag and pulled out the half-sandwich they had saved from lunch. Approaching the old man carefully, she bent down and offered it with gentle words, "Please, eat this. You look like you need it more than we do." His tired eyes widened in disbelief, as though he had been invisible until this very moment, and his hands shook as he accepted the small gift. The man ate slowly, tears mixing with each bite, as though the food carried not just nourishment but dignity. Alina sat beside him, keeping her daughter close, listening as he murmured his gratitude. He spoke of being abandoned by his children, of wandering with nowhere to belong, of days when he went to sleep hungry. Alina's heart clenched at his words, recognizing a pain similar to her own. She didn't ask for his past, she simply sat with him, letting him feel that he was not forgotten. The night grew colder, but for a moment, kindness warmed them all. After finishing the sandwich, the man leaned back, closing his eyes with relief. Alina gave him her scarf, even though she had only a thin sweater herself. "Please, keep it," she said softly when he tried to return it. The man nodded weakly, whispering, "You remind me of someone I lost long ago, my daughter." The words broke something in her chest. She wanted to give more but had nothing else. Before leaving, she promised to return the next day with something warm to eat. It wasn't much, but for her, it was everything she could give. That night, lying on the floor mattress with her daughter, Alina couldn't shake the image of the old man's hollow eyes. She wondered if anyone would ever care for her when she grew old, or if life would leave her just as forgotten. Despite her worries, she felt peace, knowing she had done the right thing. She prayed silently, asking for strength to keep going. Little did she know, that single act of kindness would change her life forever. The next morning, Alina woke early to head to her cleaning job. Her daughter stayed with a neighbor while she rushed into the grand corporate building she cleaned daily. The marble floors and polished glass walls were a sharp contrast to her world, yet she worked diligently, unnoticed by the people in suits who passed her. It was a life of invisibility, but she had grown used to it. What she didn't expect was that today, her invisible existence would suddenly be seen. As she scrubbed near the lobby, a sleek black car pulled up. The security guard straightened, and whispers spread, "The CEO is here." Alina glanced up briefly, then continued working. She had no time for curiosity. The tall man who stepped out of the car carried an aura of authority, his sharp features softened only by the sorrow etched in his eyes. He seemed distracted, almost heavy-hearted, as though carrying a burden no wealth could ease. Moments later, as Alina carried a bucket toward the elevator, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. "Wait," a deep voice called out. She turned, startled, to find the CEO himself standing before her, breathless. People around stared in confusion, wondering why the powerful man would stop a janitor. His gaze locked on hers, intense but filled with gratitude. It was you, wasn't it?" he asked. She froze, unsure what he meant, her heart racing. The CEO took a step closer, his voice trembling. "Last night, my father. He told me this morning about a woman and her child who fed him when he had nothing. That was you, wasn't it?" Alina's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. She hadn't expected her small act to be remembered, let alone bring her face to face with the son of the man she had helped. Around them, the lobby grew silent, waiting for her answer. "Yes," she whispered softly, her voice almost breaking. "I didn't know who he was. He looked hungry." For a moment, the CEO stood there, emotions raw on his face. Then he swallowed hard, lowering his head slightly in respect. That man is my father. We had a falling out. I thought he would never forgive me. I searched for him for years. And last night, because of you, he finally called me home. His words cracked, and his eyes glistened. The air around them shifted. Employees who had once ignored her now looked at Alina differently. But she didn't bask in the attention, her thoughts went only to the old man, relieved he had found his son again. I'm glad, she whispered. Family is precious. Don't waste this chance. The CEO nodded, visibly moved. For the first time, the powerful man seemed small and vulnerable, just a son reunited with a father he thought was lost forever. Later that day, Alina was invited to a private office where the CEO introduced her to his father once more. The old man, now in clean clothes and cared for, reached for her hands. My angel, he said, tears streaming down his face. Because of you, I have my son back. You gave me more than food, you gave me hope. Alina wept silently, overwhelmed by the depth of his gratitude. Her daughter clung to her side, confused but smiling as the room filled with warmth. The CEO sat across from them, watching in silence. His gaze carried respect, admiration, and something deeper, a recognition of a strength beyond wealth. You've taught me a lesson I'll never forget, he finally said. Money can build empires, but kindness builds bridges. You've shown me what really matters. Alina lowered her eyes, embarrassed by the praise, feeling she had done nothing extraordinary. To her, it was simple humanity. In the following weeks, Alina's life began to change. The CEO offered her a position at his company, not as charity, but because he saw her determination and resilience. At first, she hesitated, worried about pride and perception, but eventually, she accepted. With better pay and stability, she could finally provide her daughter with opportunities she had only dreamed of before. Yet through it all, she remained humble, never forgetting where she came from. Her daughter thrived, her laughter brighter, her eyes filled with hope. The old man often visited, becoming like a grandfather to the child who had once shared her sandwich with him. Alina found herself part of a family she never expected, one built not on blood alone but on compassion. The CEO too visited often, slowly weaving himself into their lives, not with grand gestures but with genuine presence and respect. As months passed, Alina realized that what she gave that night had returned to her tenfold, not in riches but in love and belonging. She had spent years believing she was invisible, just a single mother struggling to survive. But now she understood her worth lay not in her circumstances but in her heart. And it was her heart that had brought light into lives far beyond her own. One evening, as they all sat together, Alina, her daughter, the old man, and the CEO, there was laughter around the table. The old man raised a glass of water, his voice steady but emotional. To kindness, he said. To the woman who reminded me that even in the darkest nights, a single act of love can change everything. They all echoed the toast, their eyes shining with gratitude. In that moment, Alina looked around and felt something she hadn't felt in years, peace. She realized she didn't need wealth or status to be significant. Her life had meaning because she had chosen compassion, even when she had little to give. That choice had rippled outward, binding strangers into family, healing wounds, and reminding them all of the power of humanity. Her story spread quietly within the company, whispered among employees who once overlooked her. To them, she became a symbol of hope, proof that kindness mattered more than titles or positions. Though Alina never sought recognition, she accepted it with grace, knowing that if her story inspired even one more act of compassion, it was worth it. By the end of the year, Alina stood taller, not because her struggles had disappeared, but because she had discovered her strength. She was no longer just a single mom fighting the world alone, she was a woman whose kindness had rewritten destinies. And as she held her daughter close, she silently promised that no matter how hard life became, they would always lead with love. For in the end, it was love that changed everything.